Okay, we're live, but everybody knows the drill. We got to let the stream breathe just for a few moments to make sure we have green check marks across all 5 of our streaming destinations. And we're good. Welcome in, everybody, to the gut reaction episode here at the Huddle Up podcast, presented as always by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me, as always, my partner in crime, my fellow football priest. We're here to commiserate with you. We're here to help you exorcise the demons, but you know him, you love him. He is Zack Kelberman. Zack, we jumped in live during the halftime break, shared a few thoughts, but the Broncos surprised us with a late game quarterback change, and it had a little bit of a spark. Didn't ultimately end well for Brett Rypien, but what was your gut reaction to this final gun? The Broncos, of course, fall to the Bucs 28-10 at home, and it was pretty much a you-know-what show from the drop.
Yeah, it was a literal spark, as in if this was a firecracker, he produced one single spark, Chad. That's what Brett Rypien can bring this organization. It was just the Buccaneers kind of playing prevent defense, knowing the game's in the bag. My takeaway is that, once again, Fangio would rather replace the quarterback than the reason the quarterbacks are bombing right now, and the right tackle and the offensive line. The accountability, or the lack thereof, Chad, is still mind-boggling to me. I don't know what Brett Rypien's going to offer this team that Jeff Driskel couldn't do, and I don't know how fans – he wasn't great today by any means, but it's tough to play quarterback when you're constantly under duress, when you're constantly under barrage, and that's what Driskel was today. But it's looking like, Chad, my gut reaction to watching this game is it's going to be Blake Bortles versus Sam Darnold on Thursday night. 0-3 versus 0-3. Get your popcorn ready.
Honestly, I didn't see that coming. I mean, we received several questions this past week. Hey, with the Blake Bortles signing, hey, is Bortles going to come in and start? How soon should we expect Bortles starting? And Drew Hollenbach, in fact, jumping in with the super chat. We'll get to this right now. Appreciate you, Drew.
Thank
and
you,
of course, hat tip to this gorgeous profile pic you got there on YouTube, my dog. Bonafide superstar. He says, so, $1 million question. Who starts Thursday night against the Jets? I thought Rypien looked better than Driskel, but Bortles is far more experienced. Great question. But really quick, I didn't see it coming. I figured, if the Broncos are going to go away from Driskel, it's got to be an injury or just absolute debauchery, just plain and simple bad quarterback play, like meltdown caliber. I wouldn't quite call today, as bad as it was for Driskel, I wouldn't quite call it meltdown caliber. So I'll fall on that sword. I was wrong on that. It's going to be Bortles. Like, Zach, can you foresee any scenario, knowing now that Driskel's been benched, that they go back to him or roll with Rypien? It's going to be Bortles, right?
You can't go back to Driskel. You can't put the quarterback in the wine bottle. He was benched for a reason, and the Broncos and Fangio, and that decision came from Fangio. That wasn't Pat Shurmur or anybody else. That was a Fangio call. And once you yank him, you're saying you're not the quarterback that's going to get us by until Drew Lock. Maybe it'll be Rypien. Likely it'll be Bortles. I think Chad Rypien was just a way to get Driskel out of the game, and this is all a warm-up to get Blake Bortles under center before Locke gets healthy. So right now, gun in my head without knowing what Fangio is saying in his post-game presser, I think Bortles will get the nod on Thursday night, but no later than week 5, Chad.
Appreciate the super chat, Drew. And guys, it's another disappointment. The Broncos, for the second year in a row, limp out to an 0-3 start. Only the big difference this time around, I mean, last year, you at 0-3, you still had Bradley Chubb. You had basically lost Juwan James in week 1 with that knee, but you were still mostly at full strength. I guess no Drew Lock. He was on injured reserve. But at that point, even if Drew Lock had been healthy throughout the summer, it was going to be Joe Flacco till the wheels fell off. And they did eventually fall off. But Zach, the Broncos start 0-3 for the second consecutive year. And under Fangio, it's not, on one hand, you can find the hole in the boat in terms of the excuses. Look, Von Miller, then Cortland Sutton, then Phillip Lindsay, then A.J. Bouye, then Drew Lock, and the list just keeps adding up. But at the same time, what we witnessed today, in many cases it was backups playing key positions for the Broncos on both sides of the ball. But Zach, where the team really fell short today was in preparation. I mean, this was a team that was vastly outcoached by Bruce Arians and company, and it all started with that block punt, and then it just went downhill from there. So, you can blame injuries as, the I wouldn't say the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the first step. It was square one in this dance. And it's just broken wide open, though. Fangio's not been able to adjust and roll with those punches up to this point.
You want to talk about injuries? There's one team in the NFL that's more beat up than the Broncos, and that's the 49ers. They didn't have their quarterback, their running back, their tight end, their receiver, their defensive lineman today against the Giants. They go on the road, and they win. I think it was 36-3 or 36-6, something like that. It's coaching, Chad. Injuries are part of the game. The Broncos have been hit hard, and most coaches would struggle, especially second-year coaches, but it can be overcome with proper coaching, and that starts with game preparation. It starts with game calling, game management, situational coaching. The Broncos were out-prepared. They were outplayed. They were outclassed, top to bottom, Chad, for another week in a row.
BNS jumping in. Appreciate the question, my friend. Longtime listener of the show. He says, my priests, hear my confession. I smiled at the fact that Shelby Harris and Garrett Bowles were the best players on the field. Kind of ironic indeed. You got to tip your cap to Garrett Bowles, who, outside of one holding penalty last week on a running play, has played like an upper top 15 left tackle through 3 games. Knock on wood. All right, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But it looks as if that influence that Munchak has had on him late last season has continued into this season like we hoped that it would, making the Broncos almost still early, but making the Broncos look like it might not have been the best decision not picking up his 5th-year option, Zach. But then Shelby Harris, hey, man, we were happy to see Shelby get re-signed. We were just talking about it during the last quarter of the game as Zach and I were watching it together. Got to pay that guy. Like he's a difference maker. You know, I get it that they were able to get him back here on a 1-year deal for peanuts. But Zach, if I'm that front office, I know you have high hopes for Draymond Jones, and you know DeMarcus Walker though is in a contract year and he's hurt. I'm figuring out a way to get Shelby Harris paid and keep him here for a few more years.
Shelby Harris makes plays every single game. I have never seen a defensive lineman be better at batting passes in my life, and that includes J.J. Swat. I mean, literally every single game, whether it's a sack, pressure, tackle, quarterback hurry, Shelby Harris is always in there. And it's the juxtaposition is that Shelby on a prove-it deal is vastly outplaying Jarrell Casey, who's been a massive disappointment through 3 games, Chad. I think he's making, what would you say, $12 million a year for this season?
Yeah, just shy.
Casey?
Like 11-4, something like that.
And meanwhile, Shelby Harris making a fraction of that, and he's playing vastly better. So I was a big Shelby Harris guy. The Broncos made the right choice letting Derek Wolfe walk, but they should have locked up Shelby Harris with a long-term, multi-year contract. Because he's a Bronco, probably not going to happen, but he deserves it.
All right, guys, we still have so much to get to reacting to this game, including Mundungus' super chat here. We're going to get to him just 1 second. But first, though, we got to say thank you to the sponsor of today's show. This live stream is brought to you by sportsbetting.com, gang. Broncos country. Gambling is now legal in the state of Colorado. Here's what makes sportsbetting.com a no-brainer for sports fans. You got the sharp odds and low juice. You got hassle-free bonuses. That means that, and it comes with a one-time rollover, that means that the bonus money is yours after you bet it one time, where other sites are going to require you to bet it 5 to 30 times before that happens. The kicker, though, at sportsbetting.com right now, you can get a 100% risk-free week of sports betting up to $500. That's not just one bet, all of your bets. Play for a week. If your losses exceed your winnings at the end of the week, sportsbetting.com will cover 100% of the difference up to that $500 with a one-time rollover. So head over to sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. That's sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle and capitalize on a risk-free week of sports betting up to $500. Appreciate them sponsoring this live stream. All right, Zach, couple more quick matters of business, though. We know everyone wants to get to the game. So just quick reminder, follow the podcast on Twitter @HuddleUpPod and follow @MileHighHuddle. If you're in a position, check out the merch store, huddleuppod.com, get your swag on. And then lastly, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. If you really love what we're bringing here to you on a daily basis here with these live streams and all the content, share this out there. Help us continue to grow and reach new like-minded Broncos fans just like you. All right, John, let's grab Mundungus. Appreciate the super chat.
Thank you,
Broncos Wizard. And congrats on your new podcast. He says, how, as a Hall of Fame quarterback, do you ignore the offensive line? So talking about John Elway. I don't even remember Elway playing without an O-line. They are kind of important, but apparently tight end is more important. Yeah, the Broncos have tight ends, of course, coming out of their ear
and receiver
at this stage. But yeah, I mean, it's weird. Zach, you hit on something that is very curious. This is an interesting point. Vic Fangio is willing to make a kind of permanent type change in the game. I shouldn't say permanent. We'll just call it a bold change to bench the quarterback. But the right tackle, who has been a sieve, a turnstile through 3 consecutive games to open the season. He continues at his spot. What's it going to take? I mean, is DeMar Dotson just been sucking it up that bad in practice? I don't understand it.
It's more victim blaming. It's like Fangio's comments after Drew Lock's injury saying he wished he would have got rid of the football sooner. How about getting a better right tackle in the game? And just to expand on this, as bad as Wilkinson is, and he's trash, the rest of the Broncos O-line, minus Garrett Bowles, which is wild to even say right now, has been awful. Cushenberry got owned today. Reisner, Chad, this is the 3rd game in a row. Is he regressing now? Why is he regressing? Where is that Mike Munchak touch? Why is the coaching so bad across the board? What is it going to take for Wilkinson to be benched? And again, I'll say this, if Dotson is that bad in practice or whatever, why is he on the roster? Why not put a better right tackle so your quarterbacks aren't getting replaced? This is week 3. We're on our 3rd quarterback already, Chad. There's something wrong here, and the something is his protection, not the quarterback.
It's not befitting of a storied franchise like the Denver Broncos. Cobra Commander brings up an interesting topic that we wanted to get to tonight, and how could we not? He says, Chad, Zach, what's your take on Noah Fant's game? 3 drop passes, a false start, bowled over for a sack strip. I mean, thanks for the question, Cobra Commander. Asking ye shall receive, right? Everyone's pounding the table for Fant to get more targets, and he certainly did. He ended up with 10 targets today, led the team. Judy was right behind him with 9, but both of them only hauled in 5. And I agree with you. I think 2 of those were for sure drops. One of them I still would count as a drop, so I agree with you, Cobra, but it was high and behind him, but you got to catch that pass. So Noah Fant, it's one of those things, Zach, you brought up the phrase, when it rains, it pours, right? And that's what happens to bad teams. And we hate telling you that at this stage, 3 weeks into the season, but this is a team. I mean, the first 2 games, they were able to keep it close. They had a chance to win both. This game, they were pretty much, as soon as that punt was blocked, man, it was blown wide open, and, Bucks quickly took control. In this case, though, Noah Fant gets what he's asking for. The fans, immediately, everyone says, target Noah Fant. Cortland Sutton's hurt. Jerry Jeudy's banged up with the ribs. Noah Fant, meanwhile, has looked like an absolute stallion. Feed him. Shermer does that. Driskel does that. Rypien somewhat toward the end there, tries to target him in the end zone. And he ends up having kind of a mid-rookie season version of a game for Noah Fant. Kind of looked like the same player right in the middle of the season in that Chiefs game where he was dropping passes and all that. What do you attribute to that?
Well, first of all, this is another sign of a bad football team. This was an earmark of the VJ days where they can't overcome one mistake, whether that's a turnover, an interception, a fumble, a sack. If there's one thing that goes wrong, it gets the Broncos all thrown off, and they just end up crumbling. They can't overcome the punt block. They can't overcome the Noah Fant drops. They're just not a good football team right now. That's the bottom line. It's not negativity or pessimism. It's reality. In terms of Noah Fant, he was a beast the first 2 weeks. He's still a second-year player, young player. He's going to have bad games. Even MJ missed shots. He looked good when he had the ball in his hands. Should have caught those passes. I like the Broncos are making a concerted effort to feed Fant, but it seemed like when one thing worked for Pat Shurmur today, he kept going to it over and over and over and over again. So if he caught one pass, Fant, let's feed him 10 more. It's just, that's, again, play calling and situational coaching. Fant is going to have these games, but he's been way more positive than negative through 3 weeks, Chad.
I agree. I mean, it's nothing to get too worked up about at this stage. If anything, it's just a symptom of Fant's struggles today were a symptom of a team that is pressing, right? It's a team that's already overwhelmed. And this is something that the Broncos really have to guard against. John Elway, we talked about this during the halftime stream. John Elway's observation during the dark days, the depths of the VJ, the Vance Joseph regime, that the team would take on that here we go again type of energy at the first sign of, adversity, and then drop their shoulders, eyes go to the ground, and it would snowball and get out of control. That happened today. You could tell, especially the defense, man, who tried to keep this thing tight in the first half, but the offense just couldn't get things going, and it snowballed. And then pretty soon it felt like the defense had taken on that here we go again type of energy. And that's when you lose control. That's when the wheels fall off the bus. Levi jumping in with a very generous super chat. Love you, buddy. So much, really appreciate you. We got a t-shirt on the way to you, my friend. So make sure when you get that t-shirt, you reach out to us, send us a pic, DM it to us, a selfie, or get it up on MHH Instagram and shout you out. He says, let's not start Locke until we get our line fixed. I don't want him to end up like Josh Rosen. And that's a fair concern at this stage, Zach, with just, look, Garrett Bowles, who would think that with a guy like Graham Glasgow, a guy like Dalton Reisner, a highly touted center, rookie albeit, but a highly touted rookie center in Lloyd Cushenberry, who would have guessed that Garrett Bowles would be the one bright spot on this offensive line 3 games in, Zach?
I wouldn't have. I'm going to eat some crow with Garrett Bowles that he's been consistent and compared to everybody else, he's been pretty reliable. And that's all we ever wanted from Garrett Bowles. We weren't looking for a Hall of Famer or Pro Bowl tackle. Just live up somewhat of your former first-round billing and be someone the Broncos can count on. He's looked good. Unfortunately, it's one of those years where when he looks good, the 4 guys next to him look bad. And it's just one of those years, Chad, where, like I said, it rains and pours. The glimmer of hope is that if Bowles can at least continue this going forward, they should be able to re-sign him, I think, to a multi-year deal, have him back below market value, and hopefully build from this going forward. Silver linings.
But, Levi, your point, though, I mean, the Broncos aren't going to have time to wait for the perfect conditions to bring Drew Lock back, although we do get your point. It's a concern. It's something that you have to worry about at this stage. But Drew Lock, look, today we saw, we talked about this during the halftime stream, Zach, but today we saw Jeff Driskel, his inexperience in spades. Like, he's supposed to be, when you sign a veteran backup, you pay him a few $1,000,000 and you get some guaranteed money. He's supposed to bring some veteran wherewithal. He doesn't have that. And even though he has a little spark of athleticism and, he made some tough throws in the Pittsburgh game, you saw that inexperience today in terms of at least 4 of those sacks today. This is not excusing the offensive line, but 4 of those sacks, because they did allow the pressure, Driskel should have unloaded the ball. He should have got rid of it, including that safety in the second half. My goodness. Cody Potter jumping in with the $10 super. Really appreciate you, Cody.
Thank you, Cody.
Your consistency, my friend, a bona fide superstar in this community. He says, Driskel has the worst pocket awareness I have ever seen from a quarterback. I don't even think he knows he can throw it away. Just bleep QB play today. I give 0 blame to the O-line. I blame the QB 100. So I'm with you on that, the first half of that. And I would also concur that, as I just said, a few of those sacks are on the offensive line. But Zach, that Bucs front was getting pressure consistently. And they blitzed a lot all game long, including during the garbage time drive of Brett Rypien. They blitzed just trying to put the pressure on. But that offensive line, I'm talking interior. Obviously, Wilkinson, nothing's changed there. He's been a sieve. But how disappointing is it to see what was supposed to be the strength of your O-line, that trio from left guard to right guard, struggling like this?
Sorry, I'm just watching Russell Wilson drop dime touchdown passes, and it's so, it's so depressing watching a real franchise quarterback at work. But anyway, in terms of the offensive line, I want to point to, where is this Munchak magic we've been hearing about, Chad? They've been actually getting worse under his watch. Garrett Bowles got better. Everyone else got worse. I just want to bring up 2 points. Some of it is Driskel, like Chad mentioned, the safety. He has to get rid of the ball. He had at least another second. But a lot of that is the offensive line being so conditioned to be under pressure, being so conditioned to run for your life. It's not having solid stability around you. And again, for anyone who wants Trevor Lawrence or Fields or any other quarterback, it won't matter if you have Joe Montana in his prime back there if you cannot keep him upright. You think Broncos country would have learned that by now after 4 years post Peyton Manning. If you can't protect the quarterback, it doesn't matter who's back there. It's not going to end up pretty.
We got Discount Audio and Wheels, DA Dub jumping in. Really appreciate the support, my friend. It's always good to see you in the stream. He says, that was awful to watch. 0-3. If we lose to the Jets, that's a wrap for Fangio. The line is a complete mess, old and stubborn on Vic and Elway's part. Like I said last time, can't let this turn into culture. So, Zach, it's probably still a little too early to be talking Fangio actually getting fired. But if the Broncos lose to the Jets, man,
you got to have the conversation. You got to have the conversation.
It feels like all bets are off. But here's the savior. Here's the saving grace for Fangio at this stage, Zach, is that John Elway knows that this is kind of his last. It's all or nothing with Fangio. Like, he can't survive the franchise. Joe Ellis, I know it's a different ownership gap right now, but the trust led by Joe Ellis, they can't stand up there with a straight face and fire another head coach and not the GM. So that's the one thing that might continue to give Fangio some rope, even if the wheels officially do fall off this bus and they lose to arguably the worst team in the league at this stage, which is the Jets.
Yeah, I think it's inarguable. I mean, they got blown out today by the Colts. Sam Darnold threw 2 pick sixes. And it's funny because Adam Gase can maybe get Vic Fangio fired. And contrarily, it might be that the Broncos get Adam Gase fired if they beat the Jets at home on prime time. If they lose this game, though, which they have no business, I don't care if you're starting Brett Rypien or Blake Bortles or Jeff Driskel or an injured Drew Lock, you have no business losing this game. Your talent is just better stack to stack, offense and defense. So if they lose this game, I don't think Fangio will be fired, but if they're 0-4, losing to the worst team in football and the season spiraling, how do you at least not bring up the conversation? His seat, at a minimum, Chad, should be turned all the way up.
Chris Hernandez, 24-year veteran of the Air Force, jumping in. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you, Chris.
He's in for the live stream at halftime. He's here for the gut reaction. He is ride or die in this community. He says, teams are going to blitz the Broncos until proven otherwise. True. Why not call plays to help counter that? Hashtag, using one of Zach's phrases here, coaching.
Answer your own
well
question.
said. Touche. Zach, ways to beat the blitz. Bubble screens.
Run right at it.
Yeah. That's one thing that I liked from what I saw from Rypien a couple of times on that final drive that he got. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Is when they did blitz, he threw into the blitz. He threw into that zone that was vacated. You can't read into anything you saw from Rypien, though, because first of all, the Bucs, they were bringing pressure, but on the coverage side, they were running basically giving some big cushions. They're blitzing a lot, but giving cushions. And anytime there's a quarterback change, anytime there's how long this spark lasts is situational, but there's always that spark. You saw it last year with Brandon Allen, who comes in and beats the Browns, gets up 20 points in Minnesota, loses that. He could have gone 2-0 as a starter, and then it just comes off, talk about wheels coming off in that Buffalo game with all the headwinds and whatnot. But in this case with Rypien, you can't read too much into the ball being moved because, he actually finished. Let me just run through these stats on Rypien real quick. His only incompletion today on that drive was the interception on 4th and 1. He went 8 for 9 for 53 yards. And of course, he ended up with a terrible rating because of that interception. But nevertheless, what do you take away from what you saw from Rypien today?
I mean, he had good command of the offense. He was pretty much the quarterback we expected him to be. He had a little more zip on his fastball than I was expecting, Chad, but you also saw the arm strength or lack thereof come out on a few pass attempts. He's a prototypical number 3 backup quarterback, a good guy to have on the roster in case of emergency. Unfortunately, the Broncos are an emergency right now. He's not going to be the long-term starter. I'd be surprised if he started week 4. I think it's going to be Bortles, but when we're all grasping for the sign of life and for the sign of positivity with Broncos quarterbacking, we look at Brett Rypien. Like you said, Brandon Allen is the perfect analogy to bring in here, because even he wasn't great last year, but a new quarterback looking even incrementally better, you're always going to respond to that guy. And the backup quarterback, as the saying goes, is always the most popular guy in the locker room. It's true.
Not Connor Lehman on Twitter. Appreciate you joining the stream, my friend. Yes, pay Shelby with the money that we shouldn't give to Simmons. Zach, this was something that you touched on during the halftime stream, that, we're talking about Shelby needs to get paid. Simmons, who had a bad game to open this season, follows it up with a solid game against Pittsburgh, then comes back and has another horrid game, 2 big plays that he relinquished in coverage. What are your thoughts to this notion that maybe the Broncos were wise not to pay that big money and make Simmons one of the top paid safeties in the league?
I was one of the people who was criticizing Elway, as many were, for not locking down Justin Simmons, but he wasn't playing like a $15 million per year safety today. He wasn't even playing like a $10 million per year safety. And you can argue what he's making on his franchise tag for the season, fully guaranteed, is an overpayment for his services. He's looking no better than average right now. And I wondered about this, the morale factor of not giving him his contract, where it was right for the team and it was a good decision by the team through 3 games. You wonder the toll it's taking on him mentally. If he takes more business decisions on the field, his tackling is lesser than it was last year. He looks more lost in coverage than he looked last year. He looks like, to use your word, Chad, Justin almost Simmons. He's always just short. And that was the rap on him the first couple of years. He broke out last season. We all wanted to see, can he do it again? Through 3 games, not even close.
Definitely. Fangio from CC on YouTube. Fangio has to blitz to create more pressure. Putting in Alexander Johnson on a blitz every so often isn't good enough when we inconsistently create pressure in the front 7. Great observation. This was something, and by the way, this was something that was discussed in the live blog open thread at milehighhuddle.com. To all of our audience out here enjoying this live stream with us and participating in the conversation. During the game, of course, we're going to come to you live at halftime and then after the game here with these live streams. But during the game, we want you over at milehighhuddle.com participating in the open thread. This was something that I think it was Eric Trickle pointed out on that thread. And that is that, look, it's one thing Fangio, he doesn't like to blitz, but going against Brady and with there being zero edge pressure from Bradley Chubb and Jeremiah Tachu, he had to throw some pressure packages. But Zach, they were extremely uninspiring. When he threw pressure, it was simply Alexander Johnson on a delayed blitz through the A gap, pick one side, and that was really the only difference. And for a 20-plus year veteran of the NFL and 6-time world champion Tom Brady, it's child's play, man. It's taking candy from a baby because Alexander Johnson, as physical as he is, and he's got a playmaker DNA, but he's lumbering, man. He doesn't get there very fast. Like the play is long over by the time he could even get home unimpeded. And obviously, very rarely is a blitzer coming through the middle of a line going to be unimpeded.
You know, what Fangio did in Chicago a lot was blitz Eddie Jackson. He blitzed Bryce Callahan. We haven't seen any off-the-edge blitzes, any secondary blitzes. Like the comment says from CC, it's an Alexander Johnson blitz or a Josie Jewell blitz every now and then, whereas you have Malik Reed covering Chris Godwin. You have Josie Jewell covering Rob Gronkowski and O.J. Howard. Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse or, mutilate a dead horse as the case may be, but it comes down to coaching. And Fangio would rather play off coverage and play zone and let his secondary win these downs when they're really not and just have the most uncreative vanilla blitzes. It all comes down to coaching. So I wonder if I said this at halftime, if his calling card, Vic Fangio, was defense and the defense is lackluster, what else is he bringing to the table right now as the head coach of this team?
Do you feel like, as Craig jumps in here on Super Chat, thank you, Craig, Fangio has lost this team? Because Craig says it looks like Fangio has lost this team. Zach, how much of what we're seeing here in terms of the spirit of demoralization is simply a symptom of all of the personnel losses, the injury bug, and how much of it is just simply a natural result of what's going on now, looking like it's going to be the 4th consecutive losing season? Fangio hasn't been able to turn the ship around, showed some strong signs down the stretch last year when Drew Lock entered the fray, going 4-1 to finish the season. But then you lose him in the second game amongst all the other personnel losses that we've already discussed. But your thoughts, has Fangio lost the belief in his locker room?
I don't think he lost the team yet, but I think he's losing the team. And like I mentioned on halftime, he has this old school, tough guy, no BS mentality, but that only works when you're winning. And the Broncos went 7-9 last year. That's a losing record. They're starting off 0-3 this year. Their players are human beings too. Some of it is the injuries. You lose Von Miller and Cortland Sutton. That's your best player on offense and your best player on defense, arguably. Then you have the Drew Lock injury. So not only the record, the injuries, everything going on this year with the virus, Chad, it was a morale test in general. But when you have a coach who's preaching this death by inches and you constantly lose by death by inches, it's going to wear on you as a player, and you're not going to just respond to it anymore. It's the same thing we saw in 2018 when the Broncos tuned Vance out. It's going to happen to Vic Fangio sooner rather than later.
We got James Moss jumping in. Appreciate you, James, as a superstar here in the community. He says, hey, guys, sorry I didn't get back with you. I'm not on any social media, but I appreciate the shout-out. Okay, cool. Saw the first series. That's all I needed to see. What Kool-Aid are the coaches drinking? Yeah, man. I mean, I'm glad on one hand it was encouraging to see that Fangio had the perceptiveness and the wherewithal to go, we're going nowhere with this quarterback. Here we got another one who knows the offense, has been in camp and OTAs. I know it wasn't real OTAs, but he's been learning the playbook all year under Shermer. Let's go ahead and pull the trigger and put Rypien in. On one hand, you're like, hey, nice job. I mean, especially in garbage time, you got nothing to lose. It's whatever it was, 3-score game at that point. But on the other, he continues to sit on his thumbs when it comes to tweaking that right tackle position, because as much as the interior pressure was an issue today, Zach, I have to believe that if you can solve the consistent pressure coming off that right edge, it's going to help inside as well, because I think a lot of these snaps in terms of the interior trio, they're pressing because, maybe Glasgow's case, he's worrying that he's got to kind of pick up some of the slack that Wilkinson's putting out there, et cetera.
He can help Cush.
Yes.
Got you. Yeah. I think this comment by Kenneth Booker kind of sums up what I feel. This is Fangio. He'd be a really good coach for a veteran team like the Buccaneers, perhaps, but for a young team with a young quarterback, he's just not it. And I agree with that. And his stubbornness, Chad, his loyalty to Elijah Wilkinson, he has final say on that. Elway's not in his ear saying you can't replace him. He has power over Munchak. He has power over Pat Shurmur. He can make that switch. And if you'd rather replace quarterbacks, which should be your last resort, that's your final endgame move. He's done it twice now in 3 weeks, rather than replace the right tackle one time. It boggles the mind. I have never seen lack of accountability for one position like I've seen at right tackle through 3 games of 2020.
Glenn, the chat stream has been so fast and furious that it jumped your super chat, so we're doing it the old-fashioned way. Bonafide superstar and an MHH Mount Rushmore member of this community, Glenn. Much love to you, my friend. He says, Nick Van Nett, a healthy scratch. What was the point? Also, let's move Dalton Reisner to right tackle. He's not succeeding at guard. Maybe that would help. Hashtag MHH, hashtag Denver Broncos for life. Zach, this was something that I advocated for. What wrong one? I advocated for before the DeMar Dotson. So in between the Juwan James opt-out and the DeMar Dotson signing, I advocated for the Broncos to kick Reisner out to tackle. I know that they liked him better as a guard when they drafted him, and they had big plans for him at left guard. And maybe those plans will still come to fruition. It's still really early for Reisner's career and for this season. But until they make that move to Dotson, I just don't think they're going to move Reisner over there. Now, if they finally make a decision and put in Dotson at right tackle and he struggles just as bad or worse than Wilkinson, then I could see him maybe moving Reisner. But teams are really reluctant to do that on offensive lines. Munchak, long time. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame player, been a coach in the league for longer than he was a player. They're reluctant to do that, especially for young players, Zach, because it can upset the apple cart when it comes to players' development and momentum.
Yeah, but the apple cart wasn't upset by Elijah Wilkinson being in the game for 3 games. It's more inconsistency by the Broncos coaching staff. And at this point, considering how lackluster Reisner's looked at left guard, move him to right tackle. What's the worst that can happen? There's no way he's worse than Wilkinson. But the question then becomes, because they have such shallow depth, who plays left guard? You have Muti, who's not ready yet. And you can argue Cushenberry needed a year, Chad. He needed 1 year before starting. They threw him in there. Now you're going to throw Muti in there, who's more raw than Cushenberry. What happens if he gets hurt? It's just a cluster you-know-what right now, and it's the Broncos, paying the Pied Piper for all these years, including this year, of neglecting the offensive line. To take 3 receivers and not take 1 tackle, Chad, still baffles me.
I really have no problem at this stage with them starting Lloyd Cushenberry because the options, first of all, you put a 3rd-round pick on the kid, and he's SEC star, LSU, won a national title game. Like, he's going to figure it out. I don't really worry about Cushenberry, but especially the options behind him. Now, if you want to go back and say they should have kept Connor McGovern and offered him a more competitive deal to keep him around, thus negating the need to go out and draft Lloyd Cushenberry, then we can have a conversation. On Lloyd Cushenberry, though, they're basically making do with their best option. Like, he's even on a bad day, and the last 2 games have been bad days for him. He's going to do a lot better for you than Austin Schlottman or Patrick Morris, in my opinion. Now, we got Superstar jumping in, not allowed here, a name that we see in the super chat, Zach, time to time. Good to see you. Welcome. Appreciate you. He says, how do we go from 2010 through 2015, having a great team, making the playoffs every year, getting to the Super Bowl, et cetera, to this team where we're a bottom of the food chain type team?
Quarterback.
I would say, by the way, 2011 through 2015, but that's just picking nits. 2010 was a crap show, but nevertheless, yeah, man, it's if you don't have a quarterback, all the best coaches in the world even Bill Belichick. All right, we were saying before this season started, Zach, that it's going to be really interesting to see him have to figure out, whether or not he can win in this league consistently without a Tom Brady. Well, then he goes out and signs Cam Newton, who was basically left on the scrap heap because teams were worried about his injury history. But they're making magic. I mean, they lambasted the Raiders today, and the Raiders have looked through the first couple of weeks like a legit team. The Patriots are going to be a force to be reckoned with this year. They're going to be in the hunt, just like they always are. But in this case, the Broncos situation, Zach, the last 5 years post Super Bowl 50, it really stems down to franchise quarterback, ? Do you have one? We believe that Drew Lock has those traits. We believe that if he could stay healthy and be on the field, he can bring that to you. He can develop those traits. But Zach, you can't make the club from the tub, and you can't sure as heck help the team from the tub.
Can I jump back one question, though? Can I just say maybe the Broncos should have signed Matt Paradis? Is that crazy, Chad? You and I were looking at each other in the combine saying, why aren't they resigning him? He's been a good center, but I digress. In terms of the other topics, I just think it's too soon to talk about one thing or another. It's too soon to jump to conclusions at that spot, Chad. I think that's what I'm going to say about that.
When it comes to the quarterback question, we just don't know yet on Drew Lock. What we do know is that he can't stay healthy up to this point.
But I mean, here's the two things that set the Broncos back, Chad. Okay, this is the two biggest errors that Elway made since 2015. That was drafting Paxton Lynch. That set them back a few years, and then hiring Vance Joseph as your head coach. If he would have made two wise decisions there instead, they would have been on the playoff track. Kyle Shanahan, quarterback or not, would have had this team in the playoffs 2 years ago. It's what it comes down to.
Hard to argue that. We got Benji Clay jumping in on Super Chat. Appreciate you, Benji.
Thank you, Benji.
He says, feel like we have a lot of holes, and I'm not sure if we can even afford to keep Garrett Bowles or Justin Simmons next year, let alone fix the other problems. And that, at this stage, Zach, I think is a fair concern in terms of we don't know what the salary cap – we know the salary cap can't go below 175 million next year, but the Broncos' salary cap commitments – I mean, like Von Miller, for example, that's a question they're going to have to face next year, especially if he is unable or the team, maybe he's able to come back in December, mid-December, but the team's not competitive enough to justify putting him back on the field. What do you do? Because if Bowles keeps up on this pace, you're going to have to pay Bowles. Justin Simmons, maybe he bounces back and gets back closer to the player we saw last year. It's going to be some tough decisions next year. But Zach, most of them, those are issues that can be mitigated if you have a bona fide franchise quarterback. Yeah. We just don't know quite yet how that's going to shake out just because Drew Lock can't stay healthy, unfortunately.
And it would have been good because Lock's on his rookie contract. So you could have had him in place and you could have signed other players, even though Elway has shown an aversion to signing his own guys. To me, it's too soon to focus on Bowles' new deal. I will say if he plays as well as he's played the first 3 games, he will get a new contract, whether from the Broncos or another team. Simmons is too soon. He hasn't played like a number 1 safety. He hasn't even played like a top 10 safety, I would say, Chad. He's been really disappointing. Whether that leads into like a hometown discount or a prove-it deal, I don't know yet, but I think it's too premature to talk about contracts in week 3 going into week 4.
A lot of fish left to fry this year, my friend.
Good or bad?
Indeed. All right, let's grab Big John Mortensen, over-the-road truck driver and superstar. When he can be in the stream, he's in the stream, and he's always showing love. Much appreciated,
Thank you, John.
He says, I do blame the O-line. They sucked, meaning that you can't just blame the quarterback. The quarterback did take a few unnecessary sacks, but the pressure was there regardless of the sacks. That's where the O-line comes into play, Zach.
Yeah, the O-line is, again, it doesn't matter if it's Driskel, Lock, Rypien, doesn't matter who's back there if you can't protect him. And it seems like on every single drop back, there's 4 out of 5 culprits other than Garrett Bowles. And when that happens, you're going to see the same old repeating mistakes. It's been the same story, Chad, since Peyton hung up his cleats. They can't protect the quarterback. When they have a quarterback, he doesn't do well. It's just the story of the Broncos half decade.
Let's grab Craig Patterson as well, jumping back in. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
He says, I would take a Joe Montana right now. He stopped a kidnapping today.
Yeah, he did.
He did?
Yeah, his granddaughter, I believe, or his grandson, him and his wife, I believe, they thwarted a kidnapping attempt. Yeah, really happened.
This is a superhero, let alone a Hall of Famer. Yeah, we feel you though, my friend. Here's a good question from Mike Evans, a cornerstone member of our community. Every stream. Thank you, John. Jumping in. Appreciate you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
He says, please give our offense, special teams, and defense letter grades. Appreciate y'all. All right, Zach, I'll start. What grade do you give the offense?
For today or through 3 games?
For today.
The offense, to me, gets a D-, only because Gordon ran fairly well and Patrick made a few plays.
Special teams?
McManus had the field goal. Again, I would say a D- for the safety.
And how about the defense, who had some strong moments but couldn't take the ball away and I think only finished 1 sack, the Shelby sack, I think. I mean, Chubb got close, ended up being a 1-yard gain for Brady, but you're great on the defense.
I would say like C minus. I think that's pretty fair. They have to, Ojemudia had problems tackling. Simmons got beat a few times, and Jarrell Casey, he's been, Chad, we talked about it, one of the biggest disappointments of this season. He was invisible for another game today. So I'm going to say C minus for the defense.
I'm going to give the offense a D minus. The only reason it's not a full F is because at least Pat Shurmur got the memo, feed the ball to Noah Fant. And also he was feeding the ball to Jerry Jeudy. The quarterback just couldn't deliver as on point as you'd like to see. And then, of course, Fant had the drops. But I don't recall seeing a Jerry Jeudy drop this time around. So tender mercies from the football gods in that sense. And then, Zach, as far as the special teams, for me, it's an F. That blocked punt they allowed in the first quarter completely changed the game and allowed that spirit of here we go again to creep in, and they just couldn't shake it today. And then the defense, I'm going to give them a C minus because, they fought hard initially, and in the second half when the offense and the special teams overall, those two phases kept stepping on their you-know-whats, finally the defense was like, screw this, basically. So that's my letter grades for you, Mike, on those three phases. And then can we go ahead, Zach?
Can we just do a census count as to raise your hand if you think Tom McMahon should be fired? If he should have been thrown out with Scangarello last year, raise your hand right now. Let me just give me something.
Just give us an I. Just give us a yay or nay in the chat stream.
Y or N.
Oh, wrong one there. Hold on. We just got Mike. I just put Trevor in. Where'd Trevor go? There he is. Bear with me one sec. There he is. All right. Trevor, appreciate you, Trevor. Make sure if you're one of our newer superstars, you reach out and connect with Zach and I on Twitter so we can shout you out after each episode. Trevor says, hey, fellas, catching the live. Good to have you, bud. I bet Blake Bortles starts week 4. I don't know if it helps, but we need something, some sort of a spark. Look, we all know there's a reason Bortles went unsigned all the way till the season started. He's not a world beater. He's in the plus in terms of his career touchdown to interception ratio. But the one thing that he does have, Zach, that you can't deny is he does have a little veteran wherewithal. He played a lot of games for the Jags over those years. And, last year he was on the bench for the Rams, but he has a lot of experience. And I can't help but think that today, okay, if you had a more experienced quarterback, I would say at least half of those sacks don't happen. They're either throwaways or something a little bit more favorable. Maybe an actual completion occurs on some of those plays. The ball goes out to the hot read or he recognizes the pressure. Again, you saw a couple of plays today from Driskel where he completely misses an obvious rusher that's going to be coming on a blitz and just misses it pre-snap. So that's the one silver lining I would have in terms of hope for Blake Bortles is, Zach, he's not a world beater, but at least he's got some experience, and that should be something in the plus column for him.
I think, Chad, you and I might agree to disagree, kind of like Joe Flacco. If we're rationalizing and looking for the silver lining of Blake Bortles and it's week 4, I wonder where this season went. He's not going to be the savior. And if you watch one of his highlights, he threw the ball into his own lineman's helmet. I mean, he's still prone to the occasional butt fumble as they were. So, yeah, he has more veteran wherewithal. He can probably give the Broncos a better on-paper chance against the Jets. But again, if they can't beat the Jets, quarterback or not, Chad, with this talent they have and the on-paper coaching they have, something is seriously wrong with this franchise.
I really do think no matter who the quarterback is, unless it's Driskel, I should say, I think the Broncos are going to win the game in New York. But I still think back to that 2018 game. Granted, it was Case Keenum and it was quite a different supporting cast, but we didn't foresee the Broncos getting – I mean, talk about being thunder punched. They were thunder punched in that game. Robbie Anderson going off and Sam Darnold looking like a stud. Isaiah jumping in. Appreciate you, dog.
Thank you.
This is hard to watch. Same mistakes over and over. Is it coaching, players, game plans, whatever it is, needs to be addressed, or we need change. And again, Zach, as your football priests, we are here to at times also help you exercise the demons. And that's, I think, one of the it's one of the benefits of these gut reaction podcasts and probably every stream that we do 7 nights a week here at Mile High Huddle from 7 p.m. or from 6 p.m. Mountain to 7 p.m. Mountain is help you get these things off your chest. But Zach, there's nothing we can say here in this super chat from Isaiah that we can refute. It's all true. They're existential questions that we simply don't have an answer for.
And the answer is all the above. I mean, it's all of those factors combining. But what stands out the most is the coaching, and the game plans fall under coaching, and the management falls under coaching, and the play calling falls under coaching. If those things were cleaned up, even with a Driskel or Bortles at quarterback, the Broncos would at least be 1-2 right now. It's always the little final factor. You mentioned Belichick, Chad. He took a broken down Cam Newton, who looks like one of the MVP frontrunners right now. It's coaching. Josh McDaniels, say what you want about him in New England. He's a prodigy there. Bill Belichick, say what you want about him. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time. He can make chicken salad out of chicken you know what. And if the Broncos had a coach like that, Chad, they'd be a lot more better off, I think.
At this stage, absolutely. Now, McDaniels has never been able to thrive outside of the oasis that is Belichick. But you're right, man. They just have a chemistry together that is undeniable. Glenn says, highlight for me today was my fantasy football opponent started Cortland Sutton. Can you imagine? All right, there you go. KP in the house out in Florida jumping in. Appreciate you, my
Kevin.
friend. How about a corner blitz every once in a while? Not a fan of Vic's defense or calls. Zach, they've been very stingy against the run in terms of, the one thing you got to give to Fangio today, and there was the one deep dagger that Simmons gave up, a 40-something yard gain. And then last week in Pittsburgh, there was the deep shot that Ojemudia gave up. But one thing I'll give Fangio's defense, and at this stage when you're 0-3, it's nothing to write home about, is that they do force defenses or offenses to basically nickel and dime down the field. Very rarely do they give up the big play. They stop the run. But the problem is it doesn't matter, Zach, how good you are on first and second down, limiting the run. On third down, if you can't bring pressure and you're constantly playing coverage in zones that allow the offense and the quarterback to anticipate what you're going to do, they just end up marching up and down the field. And Victor here on Facebook says, this is my first time watching and listening. Welcome, Victor.
Cool.
Appreciate you, my dog. And, Fangio does need to mix it up. But at the same time, we were talking about this earlier today, Zach, as we were watching the fourth quarter of Broncos Bucks, and Aldon Smith is going off for the Cowboys. The Broncos had a chance to sign him a long time ago, and I know it was considered. The Broncos did consider doing it. And you think, well, it's hard to blame him for passing on Aldon because you had Von Miller and Bradley Chubb coming back. But, Zach, Von Miller at age 31, Bradley Chubb coming back from a grievous knee injury that cost him almost all of his previous season. You should have provided more insurance for edge because Malik Reed, I'm hoping, Zach, this is the game that Elway realizes we need reinforcements. Like Chicolo, he's not the answer to giving you that edge pressure. Go just give a chunk of money to Clay Matthews or T Sizzle, find out what it's going to take to get them suited up because it's going to be better than what you have now.
Was I the only one who saw Chicolo in coverage and I was like, who the hell is that guy?
91.
The poor man's Clay Matthews, the great value Clay Matthews. It's not going to work with Malik Reed. I had high hopes for him or Jerry Atachu, who they brought back. They are definitely missing Von Miller's prowess, and combined with that, Bradley Chubb isn't 100% yet. But in terms of what you said about nickel and diming the defense, Chad, if it's still, if it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, it's still death. And that's what happened to the Broncos defense. It's literally death by inches. They always give up a score in crunch time. They're always giving up that crucial third down. They're always getting the ball moved on them when they shouldn't. So that was Vic Fangio's calling card, was this steel curtain defense in Chicago, and rightly so it was. Where has this been in Denver? I know the personnel hasn't been there. He lost Chubb and he lost Vaughn this year, but when crunch time happens, Chad, the defense always breaks down. And that, to me, again, is a sign of coaching.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with all the super chats. As you guys know on this show, we do not leave a single superstar out in the cold. We'll stay late. We'll go long, so long as we get each and every superstar who is supporting the show and wants to get a question answered or something off their chest. In this case, we got Tom El Greco jumping in up in Canada, north of the 49th parallel. This is another guy, Zach, that exemplifies the hashtag state of being. Broncos country is not a geographic location. It is a state of being. Tom says, pathetic. Even if Drew was healthy, still wouldn't play him. That O-line, wow. Any quarterback is at risk. Zach, I get what this is the second comment we've had to this effect today, and I get that. But look, beggars can't be choosers. You're telling me that if you had a healthy Drew Lock, you're not going to play him right now? You have to. Look at what you're doing at the quarterback. You're rotating through. All right, what is Jeff Driskel? Third, fourth team that he's been on, former mid-round pick, hasn't been able to get traction anywhere. Then you play a undrafted rookie or a quarterback 1 year removed from being undrafted, and then Blake Bortles signed off the scrap heap. If you have Drew Lock healthy, I know it's ideal, but football never provides you perfect ideal conditions. The Broncos can't afford or wouldn't be able to afford not playing Drew Lock. So at this stage, my advice to every Broncos fan is just do everything right, build up some good karma so that the football gods can get Drew Lock back in the lineup sooner than later.
Especially if it was like a must-win game like it was today, because historically 0-3 teams do not make the playoffs. It's like a minuscule chance. They had to win today's game, even with the Jets upcoming. Yeah, if Locke was healthy, you throw him out there, or mostly healthy. Unfortunately, he wasn't, and the offensive line got another quarterback replaced. So the Broncos don't believe in cutting off the root of the problem. They want to explore the effects of the problem, and that's going to be the Elway way, it seems like. He'd rather vilify the quarterbacks who are the ones getting abused and not the ones letting up the abuse, like the offensive linemen. It's maddening. It's frustrating, but Chad and I don't know why things are the way they are.
This point here from Alex, appreciate the comment, Alex. This team lacks in so many areas. The O-line is an absolute atrocity. Although we have injuries, there are not, I'm guessing he's saying, really any players who can step in and be impact guys. We have to admit that we're a bad team. Zach, the injury bug, here's where I'm going to pick a bone here with Alex, is the coaching has been lackluster. I think the only reason the Broncos were able to contend in those first two games is because there is some talent on this team, all right? The quarterback is the issue. If you don't have a quarterback, it really doesn't matter. Unless you have Bill Belichick as your head coach, maybe. Then you can, perhaps win a few more than you lose.
Or Shanahan.
Or maybe, yes, right. Kyle Shanahan, who is an offensive genius, quarterback guru. But again, until you have a quarterback, it's going to make everything else, it all trickles downhill, and it's going to make everything else look worse than it is. The Broncos have talent, gang. Even today, Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Melvin Gordon, Tim Patrick had himself a solid game today. There are players on offense. Yes, the offensive line is beleaguered, but they're also not helped by a basically mute quarterback who has zero pocket awareness, holds on to the ball. I mean, again, for me, Zach, as much as we have to point the finger at coaching at this stage, the biggest, and the injury bug, the biggest factor here is quarterback, and that ties back to injury. But that's why I think that if you do get Drew Lock back at a decent point in the season in terms of, if you can get him back week 5 maybe, or week 6 at the latest, I still think this team could have enough. There's enough talent there for this team to potentially ride a spark of getting Drew Lock back into kind of getting back into the conversation. It's probably going to be too late going 0-3 to really make a push for the playoffs. But the one silver lining, Zach, is that there's 7 teams getting into the playoffs this year instead of 6.
You know what? It's the age-old question, chicken or the egg. Where do the Broncos go? I mean, do they get the young quarterback and they can't protect him, or they don't have a quarterback, they have a good O-line? And it's been a combination of things throughout the years. I will say, though, that if anything, we have to see Locke for his development. The Broncos have to know after this season whether he can be the guy or whether 2021 should be geared about focusing on finding a quarterback. And that's what we have to know. Unfortunately, if they throw Locke out there with the same offensive line, the same result is going to happen. He's going to either run for his life and be Josh Rosen or end up on the trainer's table with an injury. But, if Juwan James, you can argue, really set this thing in motion, Chad. They never recovered from his opt-out. It's just, you can argue that he was the bane of the Broncos season.
He was the catalyst, right, in a negative way. Cody Potter jumping back in. Appreciate you, dog. Is it bad that Rypien commanded the offense better than any quarterback since Peyton? What are the odds Locke and Lindsey play Thursday? Gordon didn't look good. I get that you're being, you are exaggerating for emphasis here, Cody, but I can just Drew Lock. I can think of a couple of games last year where he looked better than anything we saw today, including that Houston game. But your point remains the same. Rypien did show better command. And what's ironic is that, both he and Driskel have been in this offense the exact same amount of time. But I don't think the Broncos can start Rypien with a straight face next week. On the road, in conference, East Coast game, if you're going to go with a quarterback not named Driskel, Zach, it has to be Blake Bortles, in my opinion. Let's grab this one also from Jess Sports. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you.
Really just consistent. He says, our team is no bueno. I can't even get mad. Shake my head. Zach, if you were to, Blake Bortles, what do you see happening on Thursday? I think both of us agree that it's going to be Bortles, but what kind of performance would you expect to see for a Blake Bortles, who by that point will be basically about a week into, by the time he got through all of his virus testing to get into the building and get signed, I want to say Wednesday he was out on practice for the first time last week. So then you get Thursday as the game. So barely over a week that he's been with the team. What would you expect to see knowing what you know about Blake Bortles?
Well, I read on Twitter that Fangio said the decision will come fast for Thursday night. So whether that means Rypien or Bortles, we'll have to wait and see. But, they might not have to do anything for this game. They might have to just let Sam Darnold, self-destruct and score points off defense and turnovers and capitalize there. But if Bortles were to play, I think he can move the ball incrementally better, marginally better. I think it's a big game for Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay if he plays in this game, which he has a good chance to. I expect a Broncos win. It's not saying much against the Jets, but they should at least be able to put points on the board against this New York defense with Bortles in the lineup.
Fangio said earlier, I guess last week now, because Sundays weren't in a new week. He said last week that he expects, even though it's a short week turnaround, he's more hopeful that Lindsay will be able to go Thursday night. So I think there's a really good shot that Lindsay comes back. But before everyone gets their hopes up, just remember that turf toe is just a nagger. It's one of those things that just when guys think that they're past it and they're recovered, they plant and pop it one way and it flares back up. So just, keep your fingers crossed that he can keep that at bay. Black Knight 232 jumping in, bona fide superstar. Good to see you, bro. So whose head are we sticking in the guillotine? Also, did we screw up by not drafting an offensive tackle in last year's draft?
Yes.
In fact, we talked about that. I want to say it was during the halftime stream. The fact that, probably would have been smarter from a team building perspective to go with the next debatable best tackle in the second round there instead of stacking another wide receiver in terms of KJ Hamler. But the flip side to that coin, just playing devil's advocate against my own view here, is yes, you need tackle at this stage, but you also need help at wide receiver with Cortland Sutton being on. Like, it's handy right now to have Hamler in the offense. And if you had a more competent quarterback, I think you could see better utilization of his skill set, talking about Hamler. But yes, Zach and I were very critical of the Hamler move when it was the draft in the second round. We never dissed the player. We like Hamler. It's just that we felt like, with the Garrett Bowles option not getting picked up and Juwan James missing all of that year, and they just needed to hedge, and it would have come in handy as well.
I don't know how you don't draft one, and it's especially painful because it seems like every rookie tackle, one of which the Broncos faced today in Tristan Wirfs, every rookie tackle is looking good. Thomas in New York, Becton in New York with the Jets, Thomas with the Giants. Every rookie tackle this year is playing above their head, and the Broncos could have had one. I understand the logic of going receiver back to back, but you can't ignore the offensive line for the same reasons that are playing out this season.
All right. John, do you have our friend Black Knight jumped in with a back-to-back super? If you can grab it. If not, I'll get him on the next one here. I can reverse engineer it. Hold on. The producer's sending a message to me. I got to read this real quick. All right. Let me just reverse engineer this and grab Black Knight 232. His question, and then I'll put it on the screen, Zach, is also, do we start a fire sale when the trade deadline comes? You think that the Broncos are at a stage where they need to just shed salary cap and try and stack some draft picks? I mean,
what assets do they have? Maybe Jarrell Casey. Who else would they trade that has value?
I think there's a lot of guys that would have value. It just would depend on your return, and would that return be worthy of making such a move in the middle of a season?
I don't see who they would trade that's not a starter that has value that would get back a comparable pick, that's worth trading. Jarrell Casey, who else? Tim Patrick on offense. I don't think it's worth gutting the team. They don't have any, must-sell assets. So I wouldn't expect the Broncos to be traders. That would also imply that they're giving up or tanking. I don't see Elway, being so prideful, admitting that publicly with those moves.
Especially with how much positivity the organization has had with Drew Lock and for Drew Lock. If you make those moves, as Zach said, you're telegraphing a tank. And that would be admitting basically that you're giving up on Drew Lock. And I just don't think, as bad as things are right now, being 0-3, I just don't think that's something Elway is ready to do, anywhere close to being ready to do. Nate Dizzle jumping in. Appreciate you on Super Chat, my friend.
Thank you, Nate.
He says, hey, guys, love the work you do. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Oh, John's got the real Super Chat. Thank you. I'm playing devil's advocate here, but let's recap. We lost Locke, Sutton, Lindsey, Vaughn, Bouye, Sternad, Barron, etc. Can we put this all on coaching? Agree or disagree? Zach, I definitely don't put it all on coaching. Like, the injury bug here has played a significant, like,
yes.
if you were to look at, the blame for this 0-3 as a pie chart, I would put the injury bug at sharing half of that blame. But the other half is two things: coaching and not having a better contingency at quarterback, a better backup plan at quarterback.
Why are we lumping in Sternad and Mark Barron, who was a terrible signing, by the way? And I said that as soon as they signed him. Why are we lumping them and with the Cortland Suttons and the Drew Locks of the world? It sucks losing your quarterback and your best Hall of Fame pass rusher and your best receiver. The injury bug has played a part for sure. I can't sit here and deny that. But you can't sit here and deny they should have won week one, Chad. That coaching gaffe, the time management, the play calling, even the game last week against the Steelers, they could have been 2-1 right now. So they had enough talent on the field. The difference was the coaching and the play calling. That's what it comes down to.
All right. Rick James jumping in to say, make the Broncos great again. We feel you, my friend. We feel you.
One day.
Yeah, man, look, we can all sit here and say I'm taking my ball and going home, to heck with it. But really, if the Broncos get Drew Lock back, at a decent point in the season, I still think there's a chance to turn this into a respectable year. Now, we already know that the odds are stacked against them at 0-3 of making the playoffs, even though that 7th spot that opens up in the conference for the playoffs does improve the odds slightly. By virtue of starting 0-3, man, you got the deck stacked against you, Zach. Yeah. But I think Drew Lock coming back, if provided he stays healthy, of course, I think you can not only make this a respectable season, but I think you can find out a lot more about what you really have in this team,
right,
what you have in your coaching staff, including Fangio, including Shermer. So that's the one thing I think fans really need to focus on, is just you got to get your quarterback back in the lineup. And then the next thing, it's a little bit more short term and comes before that, Zach, is if you lose, you cannot lose to the Jets. And it's nationally televised Thursday night game. I don't care what you have to do. I don't care how many goats you have to sacrifice to the football gods, Zach. I don't care, what you got to do to make Blake Bortles a respectable, highly competent quarterback. You got to figure out how to get it done. That's the make or break for this team. That's the game to me where do the wheels fall off? They're starting to kind of wobble on the axis right now, but they haven't fallen off the bus yet. You lose to the Jets, boom, it falls off. Bus careens off into a ditch. Bad news.
Yeah, everyone blows up and dies. Yeah, it's if they lose to the Jets, the season's obviously over mathematically for the playoffs, but the player morale, they'd be totally checked out. They would be giving up. They would be, subtly tanking. To make the Broncos great again, Chad, I think you nailed it. I was one, and Chad was one who predicted playoffs this year. I thought a 10-6 record could be well within the Broncos' cards. Realistically now, they're 0-3. They don't have a quarterback until week 7 at the earliest. It's not going to be a playoff year, more than likely. Okay. The number one question in that scenario becomes, do we have our franchise quarterback? Is Locke the guy? That is priority and question number one. They have to answer that. After that, failing that, here's this and here's everything else. Do I have the players? Do I have the backups? Do I have the coaching? So this is a year of inward reflection and development. And we've been saying this, it seems like every year since 2015, but that's the case. It's all about development now and answering internal questions about your team and, unfortunately, gearing up for next season and beyond.
The big thing, too, is, as I said, the pie chart in terms of how you assign blame for this 0-3 start. The aspect of they should have had a better contingency at quarterback than Jeff Driskel and Brett Rypien. Well,
wouldn't have mattered.
You know what, Zach? The Broncos wanted this to be Drew Lock's team. They didn't want there to be any question at the quarterback position, bringing in even an Andy Dalton. At one point, Andy Dalton had about a 3 or 4 year window in Cincinnati where he was viewed as a franchise caliber guy. Yep. And it ended up coming apart at the seams. And, we know what happened there in Cincy. But even an Andy Dalton, definitely a Cam Newton, definitely a Teddy Bridgewater, all the known names, you would have risked that balance in the locker room. And now you're looking back with perfect 2020 vision because you have the benefit of that. I don't necessarily blame the Broncos for not going out and getting a Cam Newton, as I see some in the questions here or comments and whatnot. But they could have found even Blake Bortles. Go get Blake Bortles in March. Go get Blake Bortles in April or May and let him soak up this offense so that you have a competent backup for if and when Drew Lock goes down. Jeff Driskel wasn't it. Smith Corona jumping in. Appreciate you, dog.
Thank you, Smith.
Does Fangio have much influence on the offense? Most of the time, it just feels like he's our defensive coordinator and not really a head coach. Kind of feels like no one knows who's in charge. That last point, yes, it kind of does feel like no one knows who's in charge. Zach, Fangio has next to zero influence on the offense from what I know, okay? With the exception of key moments, he might say, like last year, week 13 against the Chargers, it's all tied up. And Rich Scangarello, what was it, under 2 minutes? Broncos get the ball back after the Chargers had just tied it. Rich Scangarello wants to kneel on the ball and take it to overtime and just hedge and play conservative. Fangio steps in on the headset and says, no, let's take a shot, see if we can get a connection or pass interference. Ends up working. They get PI on Sutton, kick a field goal, get off the game. Drew Lock gets his first win. Situations like that. And today, for example, the decision to bench Driskel, that came from Big Fangio. Now, it might not have been his idea. Like he might have had Mike Shula, the quarterback's coach, and might have had Shermer saying, hey, man, let's make a change. But it was his decision ultimately to rip that Band-Aid off, Zach. So in terms of design, in terms of game planning, I'm sure he has a little bit of influence on the game plan. But in terms of the play calling in-game and strategization, I don't think he has very much control. And that's the way he wants it, which gets back to it kind of feels like no one knows who's in charge.
Exactly. It doesn't seem like one hand knows what the other's doing. And they have no identity as a team, Chad. Are they a defensive team, offensive team, ground and pound team, aerial team? Obviously, they're not that, but they have no identity. And that starts, again, with the head coach. He stands around the sidelines, and the team takes the complexity of their head coach. And he stands there mostly emotionless. He doesn't really fire his defense up, doesn't really talk to them or the offense. He's just kind of there. And I think he ceded all power to Pat Shermer and Mike Munchak, two former head coaches. He can say to himself, listen, you guys do your thing. I trust you. I'm going to go focus on defense. That's not the job description. You're the head coach. You are the head coach of all three sides of the ball. You are responsible for all three sides of the ball. When you win, you get the praise. When you lose, you get the criticism. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, he's a defensive guy. He's known as defense for 40 years now. But if he wants to be a head coach in the NFL, and it's questionable that he ever did, Chad, he has to learn a little more offense and step in there and make executive decisions like yanking your awful, god-awful right tackle who got your potential franchise quarterback injured. That would be step number one in the coaching handbook.
All right, we got a super chat coming in from Truce the Poet, who brings up an old topic that is still kind of a tender topic on the hearts of some Broncos fans. Appreciate the super chat, by the way, Truce. We should have kept Kyle Sloter at the time. That's so many quarterback changes in the past that
should have done a lot of things.
I mean, he was a practice squad guy, like really up to this point still. I mean, I haven't been following him closely, but that's not a franchise destiny-altering decision, in my opinion.
No, he was a decent developmental prospect who looked good in the preseason, and he was a lot like Chad Kelly. But as you've seen, franchise quarterbacks get their shot. If you're a good quarterback in the NFL, you'll get your shot to be. And so far, Kyle Sloter hasn't. So that says a lot about him as well. He was always one of those fan favorites who never really panned out. And no one would be talking about him if the Broncos had a quarterback that was playing well. It was supposed to be Drew Lock. It's unfortunate.
All right, let's grab this super from David, and then I just want to go through a couple of stats from today, and then we'll see what else is left on the superstars. We're over an hour, so we'll keep this last little segment brief. But David jumping in, really appreciate you, my friend. Bonafide superstar, very generous, and your support goes a long way. Believe me when I say that. He says, Zach, I hate to disagree with you, but I don't see us getting very many wins. I think we are in the top 5 of the draft at least. I saw a team today who didn't have leadership and looked like they don't care. Well, for what it's worth, David, we had some high hopes for this team win-wise before Drew Lock got hurt and the avalanche of injuries began. But if they can make this even a 500 season this year and improve 8-8 over 7-9 last year, I mean, that would be a massive win for Vic Fangio. It doesn't really move the needle for the franchise, but it would be quite the turnaround for how badly things have gotten started up to this point.
David, I don't know what you're disagreeing with. Maybe my tweet about the Broncos not getting the number 1 overall pick, and I still don't think they will. I mean, they're not going to be a 2-14 team. It may be 5 or 6 wins, maybe 7, but not 2-14. Yeah, I expect as at this rate to finish in the top 10 in drafting, but nowhere near the range of what it would take to either draft Trevor Lawrence or trade up for Trevor Lawrence. That's my thing.
All right, Zach, just a few stats real quick that I want to go through because literally, I went from live blogging the game and Zach and I watching it together to straight into this chat. We've missed all of the media availability after the game because we love you guys that much. But I just want to go through some of these stats here real quick. So Melvin Gordon, he did run hard today. He ran hard, but it didn't add up to much because he only got 8 carries. All right, I get it, Zach. The Broncos were down pretty early, but this is going back to a first half criticism that I had when we had the halftime stream that persisted through the game. You only rushed the ball with your $16 million running back 8 times for 26 yards. Jeff Driskel carried the ball 3 times on scrambles for 14 yards. Royce Freeman, 2 carries for 4 yards. As it relates to the passing attack, Zach, Jeff Driskel finished 17 of 30 for 176 yards, touchdown, a pick, QB rating of 71. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, Rypien went 8 for 9, 53 yards, 1 pick. And then receiving, a lot of targets. Look at all those targets: 9 to Judy, 10 to Fant, 4 to Patrick, 2 to Freeman, 5 to Hamler, 6 to Gordon, which only added up to 12 yards on 4 catches. Zach, I get it. You got a lot of receiving weapons, but this tells me that Vic Fangio likes to sit up there and talk about, for example, that balance offensively. And he says, look, it's not just about run-pass balance. It's what type of runs are you doing? What type of passes are you doing? And that's great because it breaks it down to multiple levels of analysis and you can really get nerdy on that. But the simple truth is you paid $16 million for Melvin Gordon. And for those first 2 games, it looked like, hey, man, we're getting our money's worth out of Gordon. And then you only give him the ball 8 times today on the ground. This is something where it feels like the game got a little bit away from Pat Shurmur. And I understand that there was a couple of score margin, but that couple of score margin, Zach, they weren't getting anywhere with the passing game. Like, try doing something with the running game to at least make your opponent feel like, they're not 100% sure what's coming next. Instead, we get a lot of 3 and 4 wide, a few empties, shotgun, pretty much through the entire game.
That was my thing as well. I mean, Fangio can't even blame game script or game flow because it was a 2-possession game at most for most of the second half, Chad, and into the fourth quarter. So to give up on the run when Gordon averaged, I don't see his average on the screen, but he ran hard. He was, again, and I'll crow on Melvin Gordon as well. I thought he was overpaid. He's played hard. He's not been perfect, but he's running hard. To not take some pressure and try to establish the run off the bat for a young quarterback and an ailing offense, again, it's coaching. And Pat Shurmur's play calling has been uninspiring, uncreative, vanilla, ordinary, predictable. It's run, pass, 3-and-out punt, rinse and repeat. And for a guy who's been a coordinator so many different stops and is a supposed quarterback guru, you think he'd have a better feel for play calling, Chad. This is, again, though, you and I kind of looked at each other when they fired Scangarello and they brought in Pat Shurmur. Most of Broncos country lauded Shurmur's achievements, but there's a reason why 2 of the worst franchises in the NFL, the Browns and the Giants, got rid of him.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think I'm not giving up on Shurmur quite yet. I just think that he's been handed a raw deal here. I'm going to make more of an evaluation. I'm not going to jump to a conclusion on Shurmur until he gets his quarterback back. However, Shurmur has a history of making lemonade here with some lemons with a backup quarterback. 2017 Minnesota Vikings. It was all about Sam Bradford. He goes down, whatever that was, Zach, week 1 or week 2. I don't recall now off the top of my head. But then they have to go with Case Keenum, who they never commit to on a week-to-week basis. He's just kind of flying by the seat of his pants. Shurmur wins Assistant Coach of the Year from the AP, goes on to get his next head coaching gig. He rolled with the punches, and there are a lot of similarities with that team to the Broncos in terms of defensive-minded head coach, a lot of talent offensively, not a great offensive line, some talent at running back, and they just this time though, I don't know what it is, what the missing ingredient is. Maybe Keenum is better I guess he is better than any quarterback, of course, the Broncos have behind Drew Lock at this point. But nevertheless, I can't jump to a conclusion yet on Shermer. But I will tell you, I concur with Zach that I've been disappointed in him up to this point.
I mean, he had his quarterback in week 1, and he calls a fourth down shovel to a tight end. So I can't put that on the quarterback.
Real quick, Cody Potter jumping back in. Appreciate you, my friend. He says Drew Lock is 4-1 coming off injury. Maybe this is strategy from Fangio, keeping 68 in. Get Lock back, go on a run, make the playoffs. LOL. And now we're definitely reaching in that sense. Cody, appreciate you, dog. All right, a couple other things I want to get to, and then we'll bounce out of here. In the defensive box score, Zach, you got Justin Simmons leading the team with 8 tackles, 7 of them solo. Jewel Jackson round out the top 3. I guess, round the top 3.
That's
the story here in the defensive box score, Shelby Harris had at least one tipped pass on third down, and he got himself a couple of sacks. So Shelby Harris definitely defensively has to be your MVP of this game.
Oh, yeah. He was all over the place. And again, he made his case for, I believe, a multi-year contract. Every single game he comes out and plays, Chad. He always bats balls down and gets after the quarterback. He is one guy, win or lose, thick or thin, he's always playing hard and he's always performing well. So big Shelby Harris fan.
All right, just a few quick team stats. Third down, let's see how this shakes out. Tom Brady got to 50%, 8 for 16. The Broncos, 5 for 15. They moved the chains 5 times on third down on 14 attempts, 36% conversion rate. You can't win in the league that way. It goes without saying. Fourth down, doesn't really matter. Bucks 1 for 1, Broncos 0 for 1. In the red zone, the Broncos went 1 for 2. The Bucks went 3 for 4, 75% versus 50. Total yards, the Bucks ended up with 353. And Zach, I'll be honest with you, it felt like more than that watching the game just live the first go around. Broncos could only manage and muster 226 total yards at home. Granted, it's a fraction of the fan base, but you had fans in the stands.
That's pathetic, Chad.
It is pathetic, and I get why they made the quarterback change. But hopefully Blake Bortles can do better than that on the road next week against the Jets.
It's just, Dak Prescott had almost 500 passing yards today. He threw for 450 last week. It's just, you watch these other quarterbacks, other offenses. Even Joe Burrow today, Chad, was making plays against the Eagles. They had a tie game there. Kyler Murray's looking good in his second year. I mean, it's so frustrating now. We're at another year where we're talking about a team that has 220 yards of total offense against a non-elite defense at home in a must-win game. I'm just so sick of the slagging offense, the same old story year in and year out.
All right, a couple more supers, and then we're going to dip out for today. WE jumping in, one of our superstars. Appreciate you, dog.
Thank you.
He says, is Fangio really any different than Vance? 6 years of having one of the worst O-lines in the league, no pass rush, no QB, no secondary. WE wants Elway out, Zach. And I think that's, we've touched on this a little bit, but
you might get your wish.
Fangio and Elway are tied together. So at this point, Elway cannot, I think, even with a unresolved and up in the air ownership situation, he can't survive another head coaching change. Like Joe Ellis can't stand up there and say, we still believe in John as our guy. It's another losing season. We fired another head coach. We're sticking with John. Like, yeah, he brought home the world championship 5 years ago, but he won't be able to do that. This is it. It's Fangio or bust. And so WE, if they don't turn the ship around, you might get your wish.
I'll say this. As a defensive coordinator, there's literally no question. It's like a toddler and an adult. Who's a better coach between Fangio and Vance Joseph? In terms of being head coaches, though, I said this on the halftime stream, and I know it's blasphemy. I didn't like VJ, and I do think Fangio is a little better as a head coach, but that's scary. Considering how bad Joseph was, if Fangio, to me, Chad, is only a little better as a head coach, what has he brought to the table that Vance, where did he make up for Vance's faults? We thought he cleared the culture and the stink away from Vance's 2 years last year. It was trending in that direction, but it's the same deer in the headlights, lack of accountability, boneheaded moves. A lot of what Fangio is producing on the sidelines, we saw with Joseph for 2 years. So I agree with that sentiment. You can make the case for sure that Vic Fangio is not that much better, or maybe even on the same level as Vance Joseph, which is scary and depressing.
All right, let's grab these final super chats from Dennis Woods, one of the longtime listeners of our show and a superstar in the community. Appreciate you, Dennis. He says, if we continue this trend and only win 3 or 5 games, miss the playoffs? Does Fangio get fired, or will they give him one more year? I think it just depends on the form in which if you end up with 3 to 5 wins, it depends. Does Drew Lock end up playing the rest of the season when he comes back in? And how did he look? Was he the issue? Like, it really just depends, because if there's hope in the quarterback, I think it extends the life expectancy of both Elway and Fangio. But if Drew Lock comes in and it's a crap fest and, it all continues, I would say all bets are off, Zach, at that point.
I think it was Kliss who said that they want Vic Fangio back next year regardless, which is a little premature of a decision to make. I still think with the injuries, losing your quarterback, losing Miller, losing Cortland Sutton, he will get another year, but he will enter 2021 on the hottest of hot seats, kind of like VJ in 2018. So right now, I think Fangio is around for one more year, tentatively. Yeah.
I mean, Elway's under contract one more year through 2021. So I think they're riding and dying together on this journey. Discount DA-Dub jumping back in. Appreciate you, my friend. We have no identity. That's the issue. If we had a line and could run the ball, it would make a so-so quarterback look like an NFL starter. Look at the Titans. Yeah, look at the Titans. That's a fair example. But here's what I'll tell you about Ryan Tannehill. That dude is arguably the best at play action in the game. Like, yes, he has the benefit of the reigning rushing champion, and that puts defenses on their heels and feeds into the play action efficiency. But man, that dude is money in play action. So, he's got his limitations, and the Titans are going to be one of those teams that, are going to be a playoff contender as long as he's there, but it's going to be like Alex Smith. You never get over the hump because he doesn't bring anything else besides that. And sometimes it does take more than that to, raise all ships around you. But your point though, DA-Dub, remains the same here, Zach. Establishing a run game against a beleaguered quarterback depth chart, that would be your best friend, which is why going 8 rushes with your $16 million running back today kind of defies rationality.
And didn't the Titans come back and beat the Vikings today? Because I know that Pittsburgh was losing to Houston, and they came back and beat Houston. So that shows you that the Broncos' first 2 opponents were definitely beatable if they were struggling against 2 0-2 teams. And it shows the Broncos are right there. They have the personnel. But in 2 games, it was Fangio versus Mike Vrabel and Fangio versus Mike Tomlin. That is not going to go well. The Broncos were out-coached in both games, and you can make the argument for sure he was out-coached today by Bruce Arians. So they have the talent. They're close, but is Fangio the guy? Is he going to get them over the edge? Chad, is he the Tannehill of head coaches? Close, but not good enough.
Yeah, close, but no cigar. Dennis Woods jumping in again. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Dennis.
Dilemma, 2021. In the draft, do we take a quarterback or an offensive tackle in the first round? I'd vote for an offensive tackle. I would too, honestly, because I think even if you get Drew Lock back at a decent point here in the season and he finishes the year as your quarterback, you're going to see good things. You're going to continue to see a few bad things because he's a young quarterback still figuring it out. But I think they need to ride out the Drew Lock storm. Now, if you end up with the number 1 overall pick, holler at me and we can have a conversation. But I think that you need to try to focus on riding out the storm with Lock and seeing what you have and, giving him a full opportunity to be the guy. And an offensive tackle would help you do that more so than, of course, going quarterback. Now, again, my caveat to that is in that same situation I just laid out, if it ends up being the Broncos land the number 1 pick, which I don't think is going to happen, then, it's a conversation that I'm willing to have at that point. But otherwise, offensive tackle.
Yeah, you nailed it, Chad. There's a 2-pronged answer here. And the first question is Drew Lock the guy? And if they have that answer, it's like one of those branch question things. You see the tree charts or whatever. And they goes to the next question. If that's where are they picking in the draft? Are they number 1, number 3, number 7, number 9? That makes a big difference. Right now, though, considering you can have Lawrence back there or Lock back there, it doesn't matter. If you don't protect him once again, it's not going to make a difference. So right now, I'm taking tackle, and then you got to see what you have in Drew Lock. So it's kind of an incomplete answer right now, Chad. But on September 27th, tackle.
Kenneth, your point, you can get an offensive tackle, a coverage linebacker, a corner if you trade the number 1 pick. Good point. Yeah, how much do you believe in Lock? At this stage, I think the Broncos' confidence in Lock as a player is not shaken. It's just in, does he have what it takes to roll with the punches of being an NFL quarterback from a physical toughness perspective, not mentally and not, saying he's a wussy or anything like that. I'm just saying, can you withstand the rigors of playing the position at this level? And that, frankly, as high as we both still are on lock, remains to be seen. All right, guys, we got to get out of here for tonight. Thanks to each and every one of you for spending some time with us here this evening and contributing to the conversation. Yes. We really appreciate you. Mile high salute to our Super Chat superstars. Love you. Also to our Facebook supporters. Didn't get to Facebook as much tonight just because the chat was so hot and heavy. But thanks to each and every one of you for joining us. Make sure you're following the podcast on Twitter at HuddleUpPod and at Mile High Huddle. Zach and I are going to be back in the saddle tomorrow night, our usual time, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Eastern. Remember, you get a Mile High Huddle podcast live stream, same day, same time every day, and it's 7 days a week, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And the only exception to that is a game day. And the game day exception is Zach and I go live with the gut reaction as soon as the game gets over. And obviously the games don't occur usually between 6 and 7. So that's where we're at. We'll see you tomorrow night. We'll see what Vic Fangio had to say about this. We'll see what the decision is at quarterback for week 4. We're going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow night. So don't miss that live stream. We want to see each and every one of you back in the saddle with us then. And Zach, hey, man, it is what it is. We'll see if this is, Fangio can pick up the pieces, and we'll see you tomorrow, bro.
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround, too, because we have a Thursday night game. So it's going to be a lot coming out hot and heavy. I want to see the quarterback decision. I want to see how Vic Fangio rationalizes another game with Wilkinson at tackle. But see you guys all tomorrow night.
Amen. And I think it's going to be Bortles, but we'll see.
Yeah, me too.
Or Zack Kelberman. Oh, and follow Zach, by the way, on Twitter. My partner, Zack Kelberman, at Kelberman NFL, myself, at Chad and Jensen. And then our producer, John Cronenberg, at John K. MHH on Twitter. All right, gang. Much love to you guys. Keep your chin up. Hey, man, you didn't even know if you were going to have football this year. You got your Broncos. It ain't going swimmingly. But just keep your chin up and enjoy the process, man. And I know it's hard, all this losing 5 years in a row. It's frustrating. Keep your chin up and know that your football priests are going to be here with you each and every day after each and every game to break it all down, figure it all out, and which way, try and determine which way the wind is blowing on this thing. But it's football, baby, and it's Broncos football. So at least enjoy that. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad Jensen. We'll see you tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Eastern. 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern.